Hey guys, Chris from the Ultimate Recycler. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new to the channel, we do a lot of different things here. And if you've joined because you've seen a video recently that you thought that was pretty cool, and in the next video you think, I don't want to see this, hang around though, or check my playlists, because I'm sure there'll be videos that interest everyone, but not every video is going to suit everyone. This is a scrapping video. I'm going to see how much value I can get out of this old pressure washer. It came from the farm. It's one that I used to own many years ago when I had a small engine repair shop, and then Dad used it on the farm for a number of years. It eventually blew up. I don't know, I know he'd repaired it once or twice. It had been left out in the weather in the scrap pile at the farm. We had to clean up. I've brought it home, and I thought, good chance to pull something apart and just see how much scrap value we can get out of it. I could take it to the yard as is. We'll look at a few options on paper. So if any of you are into scrapping, you might find this interesting. We're going to get some brass, some copper wire, some aluminium, big electric motor. How far do we go? Is it worth it? If you see one on the side of the street, do you pick it up? And if you're not into scrapping, well, you might find it interesting anyway. Okay, let's have a bit of a better look. Scrapping things is a great way to make some extra cash, and it's quite therapeutic pulling things apart. So there's quite a community of people that do scrap out stuff. Some pick up things from the side of the road when they're having a hard rubbish collection. Other people have a little scrap metal yard and people get drop off things. It's great to save it from heading to landfill. We could take this straight to the scrapyard as it is, but we will investigate how far we can go with it. I noticed this valve block here, I think, is actually brass. And also through the video, if you're not up with scrapping and what metals are, we'll have a bit of a chat about it as we go through. So the options are, I could throw it into the van and take it to the scrapyard exactly as is, probably just put it in the shred steel or the just general purpose steel. You might get away with throwing it in a heavy steel because it is very heavy. It weighs 34 kilos. I'll show you the notepad shortly, and we'll just compare some prices of how they would take it. I think because it's got plastic on it, because it's got rubber tires on the wheels, I think they're solid rubber. There's other bits of plastic on it. I think they would probably not take it in the normal heavy melt steel, which pays, I think it's $350 a ton at the moment. So it's probably going to go into the pressing steel or the shred steel pile. And that current price, I think, is around about $260 a ton. There is a waste levy fee because you do get plastic and everything in it. So we'll check out the comparable values there. So 34 kilos, if we do get our heavy melt steel at about 35 cents per kilo or $350 a ton, we work that forward to get about $11.90 in Australian dollars at the moment. I mean, the price varies, of course. So I think if you do runs to the scrapyard, it would be worth picking it up, throwing it in the truck and taking it straight to the scrapyard. If you're doing another load or other stuff, you know, over $10, not too bad. If it goes into the shred pile, which is lighter gauge metal and metal with impurities in it, which it probably should go into, 26 cents a kilo would take us to about $8.80 roughly. So even that's not so bad, still nearly $10, but I'm sure we can do a lot better than that, perhaps even just by trying to pull the electric motor off, because they do pay a lot more than just shred steel. Now, with just about anything electrical that you pick up, you can increase your value straight away by just snipping the cord off. So we can take the power cord. This isn't a very long cord, and we have something here that, all right, it doesn't weigh much, but it is worth about $4.50 a kilo instead of about 26 cents. So big difference. It will hardly make any difference to the price of this if you still put it in the shred and throw the wire in a bin. It does add up pretty quickly. That's probably going to be about 20 cents worth. And the plugs themselves, some people pull the brass pins out of them. It's debatable whether it's worth it. And the whole question about whether something's worth it is different for everybody, because it depends totally on the time you've got available, on the pressure you have to clean up things, on how much you enjoy doing it, what you're capable of, because some things, particularly repetitive jobs, can be very tough on the fingers, hands, and even the back. So whether it's worth it or not is not a concrete question and answer situation. It's going to vary for everyone. In this case, I'll probably go through the whole process and I'll do stuff that I normally wouldn't do so that you can see where we get our value from and perhaps how much time's available. I'll try and keep track of my time to do things. I won't film it all because it'll take too long, but we'll end up with various amounts and we'll see what value we've added and how much time it's taken to add that value. So let's see if we can get these pins out. Quite often they pull out of the plastic. I could just cut them off, but I think this way we'll get more of the brass. And some people actually make up a plug soup. Oh, there we go, the whole cover's come off. We'll get a bit more wire this way as well. Some people actually boil water and put the plugs in the boiling water for a while, what they affectionately call plug soup. And that way that softens the plastic and they pull apart much easier. And look, again, it's probably not really worth it technically, but people enjoy doing it. Right, that's a bit more wire to the kitty as well. Let's see if we can coax these pins out. It's an old plug and it's gone a bit brittle in the weather, but I don't think it'll break, unfortunately. Okay, there's 1, 2, and 3. Easy to do on one plug, but if you're doing 10 or 20 or 30, it's a bit hard on the fingers. We are going to generate some rubbish, of course, this way. Now, the pins, just quickly, still have a screw on them. Some of those screws can be steel, so we'll have to be careful with that. And indeed they are. So another step involved, if we want to have the pins go in our brass bin, we'll need to undo the screws. Now, the screws can either go in a jar for hardware, which I sell, or you could put them in the shred steel. Okay, next step is to now start pulling stuff off the actual unit itself. There's brass fittings on here, and in fact this looks like it's been broken, and that's loose on top. Oh, that's all come apart. Well, that's handy. There's a big metal spring. It's quite possible that someone was trying to undo this once before. So I'll keep those bits of brass separate. The metal spring's heavy enough that can go in our heavy melt steel, so I'll make a separate pile for that. Another piece of brass, and that one's just a piece of rubbish, so we are going to have a bit of rubbish this way. Now, I think I'll pull the pump apart whilst it's on the frame, because if I take the whole unit off the little trolley thing it's on, it's going to be harder to manage it on my workbench here. So I'll just take as much as I can off before I pull it off. The trolley itself, I will probably actually sell it. I think the wheels are okay, and someone may use the little trolley for another purpose. I might only get $5 for it, but I think that's better than scrap steel. But I will just weigh it as scrap steel for the purposes of this video, because most of you won't have a way of selling that. So these are going to be very tight, I would imagine. I might have to get the hammer on them to jar them loose, and we'll see what we can take off. I'll take these bungs out. They could well have springs or something underneath them. Then we have some, looks like we have some Allen key type screws that hold this block on. The cast aluminium housing of the pump has probably got a bit of an oil reservoir in it, so it might get a bit messy. So we'll just work away at it. I'll get some of these off and we'll have a look at how it goes. I'll keep track of my time. I won't film it all, as I say, or maybe we'll do a bit of a time lapse, but I'll round up the right tools. I won't factor in the time it takes for me to find the right size spanners, because that could take a while. Now, when you're scrapping something, it's important to pick your battles and knowing when to quit, I think. So if things don't come apart easily and you're going to spend hours and hours getting a couple of dollars worth of brass, give up, move on to something else, unless it's the only scrapping thing you've got to do and you've just got more time on your hands than you know what to do with. So a lot of these are pretty tight. In fact, I can't crack that one at all. However, brass generally doesn't freeze onto brass, and a decent thump with a hammer can save you a fair bit of time. Oops, little filter fell out there. And quite often a jar is, look at that, that's all you need. And generally, as I said, brass onto brass isn't too bad. Aluminium can certainly swell when it corrodes, and you can have a lot more trouble getting things out of aluminium. And same with steel, but brass generally is pretty good. So there we have just a bung. It's got an O-ring around it, which we probably should flick off, because if we're going to have a load of brass, we want it to be clean brass and not with other bits of rubber and plastic on it. And that's a nice clean bit of brass. Check that it's non-magnetic. If you're new to scrapping, run a file across it as well, and you'll soon get to know the nice yellow softness of brass. You can feel that it's soft and it doesn't stick to a magnet, and it's yellow. Pretty sure it's brass, and I don't think they make bungs out of gold, which would be a lot heavier and a lot softer. So that's what we're going to do with the rest of these bungs here. There's some on the bottom as well. I'll just give them a thump with the hammer. They should undo pretty easily. Same with this one as well. I'll keep track of my time, but there's quite a lot of easy to get brass fittings here, and I'm not going to keep any of them to sell. Brass is a pretty good price, and to sell these, it's just not viable for my shop to take up space trying to sell little brass fittings. Yep, that one needs a hit too. I'll be back with you shortly when I've cleaned this section up. Okay, 15 minutes in, I've got all the bungs out that I can get. I can't get this bracket out because the bolts won't come out until I take the pump off the motor. But I've got all the basic brass bungs out. I haven't taken these Allen key screws out to get the housing off, but we've got 1 kilo of brass out of that. I've taken the O-rings off it, so it's clean brass. It would go to the scrapyard for around about almost $8 a kilo at the moment. Pretty good brass. We did have our 3 pins in there from our plug, but that wouldn't weigh very much. So 1 kilo of brass in about 15 minutes is not bad. Not a bad income rate, actually. What, $8 times 4, so $30-something an hour? Not too bad. That block will be even better. Hopefully those bolts come out okay. Same theory with those. I'll give them a thump with a punch and they should undo, although they do screw into cast aluminium, so they're likely to be a bit more seized. Even if they turn off, we should be able to get the brass housing off. If it leaves the remainder of the bolt in the cast aluminium housing, well, that might be going for iron aluminium anyway, depending on what's inside it and how well it comes apart. But aluminium is certainly a lot worse to work with, particularly when it's in a corrosive situation. We had a bit of water trickle out of here, so it's going to be fairly corroded inside. Let's try and get these ones out next and see how long that takes us. A quick close-up here before I start. You can see there's 8 long bolts that take an Allen key, and this housing should come off once I get this away from the main assembly. So if those 8 come out fairly quickly, I think these valves, I think these will actually lift out. They appear to be loose. There we go. So that's just a little plastic valve assembly. Oh, I might have a brass. Yeah, I think it's got a brass sealing thing on the bottom. It's got a spring in it. But they're easy to get out. Let's try and undo those bolts. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to give them a thump though. Found the right sized Allen key, and it's way too tight to do it that way. Let's try the old trick with the ring spanner to give us a bit of extra leverage. Oh yes, okay. We can probably just crack them all like that. But you saw it took a fair bit of leverage to get it to crack. Let's see how long the bolts are. I'm surprised they're actually coming out, you know. Oh, they're not overly long. All right. I'll just try to give them each a quick thump with a hammer and a punch, and then they'll undo a lot easier. All right. Probably couldn't get a lot of leverage with the hammer in that direction, but I think they'll, yeah, look, much easier. We don't need the big spanner now. Okay, let's get these out as quick as we can. And we'll get the rest of these valves out. Now, if that's all that's holding that on, it should come off with a bit of a thump. Well, it's starting to come off. And there we go. That's a great big lump of brass. We do need to clean up a little bit, but that's well worth getting off. So we've got to take these fittings off here. There'll be O-rings on there. I think that fitting is actually a cast aluminium. Oh no, that's probably brass. Just got a bit of corrosion on it. So, yep, that's a good piece. Well worth getting off. And we've got some plunger type things here. There's more brass here, just with an O-ring on it. And these plungers themselves may well come out. We'll clean up this and I'll be back with you shortly with a rough time to do this part. Another 15 minutes pretty well, and I did get the grinder out because one of these fittings was cast aluminium and I couldn't undo it easily, so I cut through one section with a grinder, hit it with a hammer, and it broke up pretty easily. Cast aluminium is quite brittle, so that separated that. Another piece of brass. This is a really nice big chunk of brass here, and we get just over 2 kilos on top of our other brass that I've put in another container. So 2 kilos here, about $16, say $15 in 15 minutes. That's a good hourly rate, well worth getting that brass. They're not all going to have a nice big brass housing. This is obviously an older model, but if they do, good money in this stuff. So we're really kicking goals as far as money for our time. We've also got a little bit of cast aluminium here. We've got a few other bits of heavy steel, just the bolts and things. I think probably what we'd do now, I certainly wouldn't give up on scrapping normally. I'd say, all right, we've got good value there. Let's get the motor off because we'll get good value there as well. So the next step, I think, is to take the whole assembly off the trolley, and then we can cast that aside, separate the actual pump from the motor, weigh up and see how long it takes us to get that much, and then look at if it's worth getting into here further. Okay, the quickest possible way to get this off the little trolley is probably to get underneath and use a grinder on the bolts, because I'd say they're pretty rusted tight. Let's turn this over without damaging anything in my shed, including my back. Looks like there's been a bit of wildlife in here. Hopefully there's nothing here at the moment. And some weeds and things have wrapped around the axle. Alright, so we have these 4 bolts to take the motor off. It'll be pretty awkward to get the grinder in there. I think we'll just put a spot of spray on those and they should undo. And the pump is actually attached to the motor and not to this frame. Alright, let's get some spray on those. Bit of old WD-40. Come into someone's shed I cleaned out years ago. And we'll get a socket under that. They're undoing surprisingly well. Okay, it looks like we're leaking a bit of oil, but that's perfectly fine. We probably won't put the wheel through it. So we've got one bolt that won't come out here very easily. No, I just put the wheel through the oil. Let's mop it up first. And the last bolt was that tight, it turned off, which is kind of good. It saves me undoing it all the way when it was tight. So our motor and pump should come off here. And it's pretty heavy. Oh. Okay, there's our trolley. I am going to try and sell that for $5 at the shop. I might even be able to get 10 on it, but I couldn't be bothered cleaning it up. I'm just going to put $5 on it. The wheels are okay. One of them's a bit oily now, but we will weigh that up with the light pressing steel when we do our final calculations. Next thing is to separate the pump from the motor. Oh, we can't get a ring spanner on there. Hopefully these ones aren't too tight. They're going to undo okay. And hopefully the thread's not too long. They're nice and loose, that's great. Alright, I wonder if the pump will just slide off the motor. I'm not sure how it's attached. It doesn't want to let go easily. Oh, there's another brass bung underneath. We better get that one. More brass, always nice. That's going to drain all the oil out. We probably should get a container to put the oil in. Probably would have made sense to drain the oil in the first place, but anyway. I'm actually surprised there's much in there. That's pretty much it, I think. Try and keep my bench a little bit clean. So I'm still not sure how to get the pump off the motor, and this is where you don't want to waste a lot of time scrapping. The whole lot as it is could probably go as electric motors, but I'd like to just get this off if I can. There must be some way to remove it. There is a cover here with 4 more Allen keys. We might take that off and see what's inside anyway. Okay, a bit oily. There's some cast aluminium. So that's good. I've got a little cam set up in here which operates the plungers. I think we'll be able to get the entire housing off, and there's a fair bit of clean cast aluminium here. There's a sight thing for the oil level. We'll take that off too. That's just plastic. So our housing's pretty much clean really, other than these plungers on this side. I guess we'd better try and take those off. There might be a bit more brass here anyway. Now, are they brass? Those little sleeves. I think they're ceramic. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're ceramic, so no scrap metal value there. Aha, I was correct. These are ceramic. I just broke one getting it off. It was a bit tight. But there's some copper washers either side, so we'll save them. Okay, now I don't think those plungers can come out until our cam's out of the middle somehow. We still need to get it off the motor. I think it just presses on a bearing. I'm going to have to get some good levers on here and try and give it a bit of a belt. Maybe we can coax it off with a hammer. It's going to break the fins. Oh, it's moving it. It's sliding off. There we go. It was on a keyway. So we now have an electric motor that we can sell as it is. We'll weigh that up in a minute. We have a big lump of cast aluminium. This housing will come off this end with some more Allen keys. They're a bit tight. We'll give those a hit. Okay, there we have our cast aluminium housing. That's clean enough to sell as cast aluminium. We have a big seal in here and the camshaft assembly. I think that's got a punch back through that way. The bearing will also punch out. So that's going to take a little bit of beating around to get that shaft out. It shouldn't take much. I'll prop it up on a brick or something outside, give it a hit through there. I won't film that, but I think it'll come out fairly easily. Yeah, that just hit through quite easily. There's the oil seal. That's just going to be in the rubbish box. Big bearing on this end. And I think it's just a matter of working it through the little plungers to get that out. This is the messy part of the scrap. Certainly I don't normally do gearboxes because they are very messy. But I thought we might as well do this one to see how much value we get. So there's our little camshaft on a bearing. That can go in with heavy melt steel. Doesn't matter that it's oily. And then little cam followers. Okay, interesting. So the cam followers are cast aluminium. And they have a big rivet through. Oh, that's just going to push out like a a gudgeon pin, so that's easy. That can go in the steel. Let's just check that because I'm pretty sure it was steel. It would be in that application. So there we go, sticks to the magnet. Cast aluminium cam follower, so that's good. And this piece is stainless. I'm pretty sure it's stainless steel. That's the main plunger that had those nuts on before. A couple of O-rings on, but they can go in with our stainless steel. So I've got 3 of those to pull apart. And that's the end cap of the camshaft. That's just a needle roller bearing, so that will be steel. And the rest of it is pretty much nice, unadulterated cast aluminium, and a fair bit of weight there. So yeah, we'll weigh it all up and see if it was worth doing. But this part of the scrap out has taken half an hour because it's fiddly. You've got to hit things with a hammer. You do get a bit messy. So it'd be interesting to see what value we get here for half an hour as compared to our brass haul before. I'll just finish pulling these apart and I'll weigh things up. Okay, all tidied up. I've cleaned my bench up a bit and I've got the notepad with lots of notes and figures, and hopefully we can make some sense of it. I'm not going to pull it apart any further. Plenty of people do scrap out electric motors for the copper wire. There's a cast aluminium end plate there. There's going to be silver contacts in the switch. As far as this video is concerned, being the pressure washer, we've done that. Electric motors, well, maybe we'll look at another day. I don't usually pull them apart. I'm going to sell that as it is. We'll have a look at the figures in a second. We do have a small pile of rubbish and everything else segregated. So certainly our brass was the best find. Now, we'll see if we can make sense of this. Initially, we could have thrown it in the shred, which I think you would have had to do. I don't think you'd get away with putting it in the heavy melt steel. So it was only worth about $9. For 15 minutes work, we pulled off a lot of brass bungs and fittings, and we made about almost $8 in about 15 minutes. And we still would have had most of this value because we only took 1 kilo off it doing that. In the next 15 minutes, we got that brass housing and a fair bit of weight. It was actually just over 2 kilos. I've rounded it down. So we made better than $1 a minute, and we still probably didn't really take much away. We're still probably $8 if we had to throw the rest in shred. So for half an hour, we really got some good value there. Then the next 30 minutes or half an hour, the motor weighed 18.4 kilos. So that's worth $23 as an electric motor. Taking the gearbox apart was fairly messy and time consuming. It probably took us 10 to 15 minutes to get the actual motor and the pump off the trolley because one of those bolts put up a bit of a fight. But when we broke down the gearbox and the motor separately, we had $23 for the motor, $3.70 of cast aluminium, about 35 cents, about a kilo of heavy steel. That was the camshaft and the heavy bolts. 8.1 kilos of shred. Well, that's the weight of the trolley that's left. Now, I'm still going to sell that for maybe $5 or $10, but for a scrapper, it's, if you sell your shred steel, it's worth about $2. So, did we get much of a good return for our extra half an hour's work? Well, not really. We actually got okay return for the first 10 to 15 minutes getting the electric motor. But once we got the motor and the pump off the trolley, I think the last 15 to 20 minutes of getting messy hands and an oily bench and just getting these few little bits wasn't really worth it. But in the end, we spent an hour on it. It was pretty good that it worked out 15, 15 and 30. So we spent an hour scrapping. We got about $52 return, which is a good step up from our $8. So, we've got, what, $44 or so for our time. The best option in my view was certainly pull the brass off it. It was $23 worth of brass all up, and about 15 minutes to pull the motor and the pump assembly off the trolley. Probably wasn't quite that long. So 3/4 of an hour, and if you can get away with selling that electric motor with the pump on it as a motor, you're then getting paid motor price for this stuff, well, the heavy steel, also some of the rubbish, and even the oil. If you can get away with selling that electric motor with the pump on it, and the pump wasn't overly large, you can see it there, I think most yards would probably accept that bolted to the motor as a complete motor. And that, in my mind, would be the best return, because you'd get $27 back on the motor. You've still got your $23 worth of brass, $51 for about 3/4 of an hour worth of work. And on top of that, you've still got the trolley to sell for shred, which was, what, about $2. But I think I can sell that as a trolley. So there you go. Interesting breakdown, I think. It certainly teaches you something when you time yourself and when you're realistic about the time it takes. Of course, it took me a little bit longer because I had to find tools. When you've got a good setup in your workshop, it's much quicker. And of course, if you're not filming, it's quicker again. But I'm pretty happy I pulled this apart. I reckon it was well worth it, especially for all that yummy brass. Now, in those figures, I didn't mention our small pile of stainless steel. There was another brass bung, some copper washers, and our electrical wire. So not very much there. It's probably $1 or something all up. But, you know, it's all extra little bits that add to our buckets that add up eventually to a pretty good payday at the scrapyard. And if I could get $10 for this trolley at the shop, I'll try 10. I probably really should hose it off. It's pretty filthy. But that brings my total up to about $60 for really about an hour's work. There you go. I think I made a good choice to pull it apart. Hope you guys got something from this. If you do pick up a pressure washer, perhaps a more modern one, like a Karcher or one of those more modern hardware store items, you won't get a big brass block. They're probably all die-cast metal or plastic. But these older ones, especially with a big heavy electric motor on it, very nice return at the scrapyard. Thanks for watching, guys. Catch you in the next video. Bye for now.